From a secret location in room 100 of 540 Jack Gibbs Boulevard, this is Craft. I'm your host, Doug Dangler. I am here at the 2015 ComiCon with Donald Templeman, who is the author of Krylon?
Krylon and the War of False Prophets.
All right, so tell me about Krylon and the War of False Prophets. How did it get started? What's it all about?
Well, Krylon and the War of False Prophets. Krylon is a character that's recurring in a couple of my books, and Krylon is an alien hero who is brought in to mediate a conflict between two warring planets that are using religion as the impetus for their interplanetary conflict. However, there's actually an ulterior motive to the conflict of the war that's being waged. So Krylon is the hero that I use in a couple of my books. He's a character that I created actually 20-some years ago when I was in school, and I found that I could use him allegorically in science fiction, much the way C.S. Lewis wrote allegorical Christian science fiction back in his day.
Okay, so what's the, not to give anything away about the book, but how do you use it allegorically?
Well, it's an allegory in a way for the Iraqi war, where a lot of people claim that Christianity is a reason to go to war, just as the jihadists claim that they're going to war for Islam, when in fact that's not exactly what jihad means. In my book, people are using religion as an excuse to go to war when in fact there's ulterior motives to the war that they're waging. So I like science fiction and I enjoy superheroes, and so I've created my own hero and my own story to tell a story that's applicable to Earth allegorically.
Okay. What makes Krylon a superhero? What powers does Krylon have?
Krylon experimented on himself, quote unquote, 15 years ago in his timeline, experimenting with something called pyrogenics, which allows him to spontaneously combust, only he burst into flame and ended up murdering his wife by accident, and through grief and through a lot of spiritual angst, began to wander the universe trying to find some form of truth in his life, and eventually God touched his spirit and told him that he needed to fight for truth in the universe on behalf of God. So that's kind of what his story is.
Okay. How many books do you have in this series so far?
It's not a series, although there are two Krylon stories. There's 3 books. The first book that I wrote is called The Last Champion of Earth, and that's actually about Earth 200 years in the future, where humanity has completely done away with God, but they find that world doesn't work quite as well as they had hoped. That book's not here today. The second book is The Planet of Mortal Worship, which is about Krylon, that alien hero who travels back in time to assist a religious leader with the reformation of her planet's religion. She's both kind of the Pope and the Martin Luther of her planet, and she's undertaken a reformation of her planet's religion because that planet's faith has become so ritualized and secularized that people are turning away from the Word of God. So he goes back in time to assist her at the direction of what's called the Devil's Minion, and he also finds that this woman resembles his wife who passed away 15 years prior. So that's the second book.
Okay, so tell me about your writing process. You started this 15 years ago. What is it that...
Yeah, actually longer than that. My writing process, I wasn't arrogant enough to think I could write a novel initially. I was doing a lot of short stories. And then one day I had an idea for a longer short story that I thought was going to be 30 pages long. And when I got up to about page 50, I figured it was going to be maybe 60 pages long. When I got up to page 75, I said, well, maybe 100. And then when I got to page 100, people had to tell me that I was writing a novel. So I just kind of stumbled into it. Okay. After that, it's gotten harder because I actually realized I could write a novel. And so I've got to be a lot more structured in my processes and doing more outlines, but it's worked out very, very well nonetheless.
So do you write in a linear fashion, or are you like, here's an episode that I really want to do first, and you write that, and then you go back and switch other things? What's that process like?
I guess it's linear from the standpoint of, I think the first book that I did, it was linear and just kind of took off and wrote itself based on the story that I wanted to tell. With the second book, I knew how I wanted the book to end, but again, you start from beginning to end, and as the characters begin to develop and plot lines begin to develop, you begin to branch out into different directions. And then I had to outline the last half of the book to make sure that the next 25 things that I wanted to happen would happen in good succession. So I guess you'd call that linear. And then the third book, I knew what I wanted to do as well in terms of telling an allegorical war story. I will say that the ending came to me late in the process. I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but as often happens when you're writing a story and creating characters and building relationships, other ideas come to you. And I thought I came up with, or I shouldn't say I came up with, but I think God helped me come up with a very ingenious way to tell a story at the very end that was very, very meaningful. So it's been fun. It's a great process, and I enjoy writing, and it's what I love to do more than anything else in the world.
Okay. What's next on the horizon for you?
What's next on the horizon for me is coming back to Earth, and I'm doing a book that's going to be called The Liberator, and that's also going to be allegorical science fiction tied to both, it's going to be more of an African-American story actually, about African America resegregating itself 200 years into the future because they feel that it's better to be separate than to be part of the rest of the world. Of course, that doesn't work out very well either, but it's kind of foretelling where things are going right now with the lack of African American leadership in this country and the failure of race relations in this country. African Americans taken a lot of steps backwards, and so from a science fiction perspective, I'm going to tell that story in terms of where we're going from here and where we need to go heading into the future. And again, I will use faith and Christianity as a driving force behind that as well.
Okay. Well, Donald Templeman, thank you very much for talking to me and telling me about your books.
All right, thank you. A lot of fun.
For more information from my guests, visit www.crafttheshow.com. This is Doug Dangler. Till next time, be creative.